Hello, my name is Justin Kettle. Thank you so much for watching my capstone presentation, Wolves, Yetis, and Impossibilities, a theoretical foundation for immersive art experiences. Now, immersive art experiences, what does that even mean? The concept of immersion or immersive art has various precedents in art history. However, in the past decade or so, immersive has taken on this very specific meaning as art collaboratives have used this word to distinguish their large-scale, often multi-room environments. Installations like Meowolf's Convergent Station and Prismagic's Shiki Dreams represent the collaborative effort of large teams of artists working with both traditional media and digital technologies to create bizarre, narrative-driven experiences. These experiences have similarities to previous movements in architecture and installation art, but the fantasy and science fiction narratives, as well as the coordination of traditional and digital media, remains unique to this moment. After visiting these exhibits and conducting interviews with two of their chief creatives, I would propose that the language of surrealism offers us a theoretical entry point into this new movement. As these exhibits represent realities that are both physical and imaginary, the unreal made real, Andre Breton's vision of surreality begins to explain the experience of these spaces. Now, these immersive experiences are both difficult to describe and difficult to capture in photographs, but I'll do my best. We'll start with Meowolf. Convergence Station in Denver is not Meowolf's first exhibit. The art collaborative had its start in Santa Fe and opened its first permanent exhibit in 2016. And Convergent Station is their third permanent immersive space that just opened this past year. Convergent Station represents the collision of four alien realities with our own. The first environment you enter is called C Street, which is the main thoroughfare of a world called Immensity. There are street signs, space-age vehicles, talking billboards, working payphones. You can call different aliens on the payphones. And there are also Meowolf employees decked out in alien costumes that talk to you as if they are alien citizens of this world. And if you see a door in Meowolf, most likely you can open it. And once you do, you begin to journey through a labyrinth of smaller rooms. There's a demented pizza joint. There's a pile of trash that plays music, all of these different places. And eventually wander through far enough and you end up in one of the other larger worlds. There's ossuary, which is this cavern-like space with whispering voices and bizarre assemblages housed in these glowing tubes. There's Emia, which is an ice world with this massive space-age cathedral. And my personal favorite is Numina, which is this multi-level swamp world teeming with sculptures of alien creatures and plant life that glows and chimes. Now, this cosmic intergalactic story isn't instantly apparent, and in many ways that's the point. Bits of this story can be discovered by reading books, signs, or documents that are scattered around the space, watching videos, talking with the employees. Really, the joy and point of this space is to become invested in the story, to discover more about it as you engage with the environment. Meowolf is absolutely massive. It's bigger than the Guggenheim Museum at 90,000 square feet, and it's really overwhelming. Prismagic's Shiki Dreams, however, was a much smaller exhibit and a much calmer experience to walk through. Running from early 2020 to late 2021 at Prismagic Studio in Denver City Park, this installation transformed recycled materials into a mystical forest lightly infused with Japanese mythology. On the left here, you can see the vestibule. There was light filtering through sheets of perforated paper that made it look like a leafy canopy. There was this tree made out of twisting PVC pipe. This shack was made out of recycled fence, and it formed sort of a shrine in the middle of the vestibule. There was also the white room, which had these low-hanging vines made out of tissue paper, a waterfall made out of twinkling Christmas lights and cellophane, this kind of puffy, fluffy sun cloud thing that was made out of polyester stuffing. There was also this room of birdhouses made out of cardboard that had dioramas or small digital screens playing videos inside of them. And then at the very back of the space was the dragon room. Now, this room was dark when you first entered, but once you pushed a button, the lights on the body of this massive dragon would glow and a smoke machine would activate. And it was really kind of an intense, powerful experience confronting this dragon. There was an app that accompanied this experience that played videos, animations of a butterfly traveling through this mystical forest. They also played songs unique to each room, different music to sort of build the emotional environment. Visitors were also given blacklight flashlights that revealed messages and details in UV reactive paint throughout the space, like the one seen here. Similar to Convergent Station, these devices were meant to help viewers engage with the space. The narrative revealed was far looser, more of a vague New Age mythology than a framing plot, but still, the viewer's interaction with the space revealed the details of an imaginary world. From videos to the progression between rooms, viewers are engaged with this narrative on multiple levels. According to the artists, the multiple levels of engagement is part of what immerses you in these spaces. I interviewed Jennifer Mascara, who's the head of creative for Prismagic, and she defined immersion as, quote, being transported completely. I want you, when you come out, to have kind of lost the context of time and almost forget that there's an outside world. I also interviewed Chadney Everett, who is one of the senior creative directors for Meow Wolf, and he also used the language of transportation to describe immersion, not just in immersive spaces, but as the goal of all art. He said, quote, isn't the intention of all art to be immersive, honestly, when you think about it? The best art, when you're engaging with art, and the engagement is on a deep level, that engagement can totally transport you. So those are their definitions of immersion, but they are not the only people out there calling their work immersive. For example, perhaps you've heard of the many immersive Van Gogh exhibits and similar projection-based exhibits that have overrun the country. These are exhibits that project Van Gogh's work across floors, walls, and ceilings. The cultural phenomenon and merits of these exhibits are a whole nother subject that I don't have time to get into here, but this is another example of an exhibit that is trying to, quote unquote, immerse you, in their case, by surrounding you with visual stimulation. There's also a wave of immersive theatrical productions, mostly inspired by Punch Drunk Theater Company's adaptation of Macbeth's Sleep No More. In these productions, multiple scenes occur across multiple rooms at once, and audience members, who you can see in the photo here on the right wearing masks, can wander, watch the action, rifle through drawers, and discover the unfolding plot in any fashion they like. There's also, and I wish I was joking, a toilet that's being marketed as an immersive experience. This seems like a really poor marketing strategy as far as I'm concerned, but I think this is indicative of how immersive has become just that, a marketing strategy. So, does it actually mean anything in terms of aesthetic experience? There are many precedents for immersive art throughout history, and our modern understanding of the word immersive in terms of art comes from two theories put forth early in the modern era. In the mid-19th century, the composer Richard Wagner defined what he called the Gesamtkunstwerk, or to paraphrase, the total work of art, which sought to unite every branch of art into an all-embracing whole. Wagner identified the operatic drama as the ultimate Gesamtkunstwerk and its use of both visual and performing arts to enfold audiences in the stories taking place on stage. The architect and founder of the Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, espoused similar ideas about architecture as, quote, the unified work of art, the great structure. Since architecture literally contains all other art forms, as a discipline, it has the capacity to create a total aesthetic environment that engages the viewer through multiple mediums. Now, perhaps it's self-serving of these artists to identify their respective disciplines as the culminations of aesthetic experience. Nonetheless, their theories define an immersive artwork as one which unites multiple mediums to create both a physical and an emotional experience, engaging many, if not all, of the viewer's senses. And we see all of these principles at play in Convergent Station and Shiki Dreams. We have the coordination of multiple mediums as well as digital technologies. We also have the movement through architectural space, creating that emotional progression as you go from world to world or from room to room. However, these theories fail to account for our perceived entrance into another reality entirely. This image is from Meow Wolf's first exhibit, the House of Eternal Return in Santa Fe. The exhibit starts in a recognizable Victorian house with some strange objects and artifacts here and there, but the refrigerator in the kitchen actually serves as a doorway into the even stranger world beyond. Chadney Everett points to this as emblematic of Meow Wolf's approach to their spaces. He says, quote, I think that's probably why the refrigerator in Santa Fe has become so iconic for us, because everybody knows what's inside a refrigerator. We just know. And when you open that door and have your expectations blown away, that's a thrilling moment, close quote. I think this is core to what these spaces do. We walk into a place that overturns our everyday expectations through its strangeness. We walk from the real world into an imaginary narrative. This entrance into another reality is what leads critics and artists themselves to call these spaces surreal time and time again. And here are just two of several examples of the word surreal as it proliferates across the literature about these spaces. In terms of prismagic, one critic calls Shiki Dreams a surreal experience that combines all of the senses. Prismagic talks about its first exhibit, Natura Obscura 2019, and calls it a visually stunning walk through a surrealist forest. Meow Wolf calls Convergence Station a surreal science fictional epic. One critic calls Omega Mart, which is Meow Wolf's exhibit in Las Vegas, a surrealist supermarket. So clearly this word is used time and time again. As far as art history is concerned, surreal, of course, has a very specific meaning in context of the surrealist movement. And I want to say from the outset that when I asked Everett and Mosquera about their relationships to surrealism, they acknowledged limited inspiration from the movement, but they were both very clear that they are not intentionally trying to revive surrealism's legacy. However, as the word surreal is used so often, I think it's worth examining surrealism to see if there are any similarities here. Most of us probably think of Salvador Dali when we think of surrealism, for better or worse. We tend to think of surrealism as merely dreamlike imagery, like in the infamous Persistence of Memory, or as a violent expression of the Freudian subconscious, such as in more erotic or suggestive works like Dali's Lugubrious Game, seen here on the right. But what we tend to forget is that dreams and desires were seen by the surrealists as merely lesser expressions of the greater human imagination. The poet André Breton, also called the Pope of Surrealism, founded the movement and literally defined the word. In his second manifesto of surrealism, he wrote, quote, "Let us not lose sight of the fact that the idea of surrealism aims quite simply at the total recovery of our psychic force by a means which is nothing other than the dizzying descent into ourselves, the systematic illumination of hidden places and the progressive darkening of other places, the perpetual excursion into the midst of forbidden territory." This perpetual excursion was a reconnection of the individual with their imagination, which Breton saw as dead in modern life. The reawakening of imagination in the modern spirit, Breton thought, would bring about nothing short of a revolution in art, politics, and life in general. Breton's ultimate goal was that people would be active in their imaginations not just some of the time, but all of the time, the two realities continually brought together. He said, quote, "I believe in the future resolution of these two states, dream and reality, which are seemingly so contradictory, into a state of absolute reality, of surreality, if one may so speak. It is in quest of this surreality that I am going, certain not to find it, but too unmindful of my death not to calculate to some slight degree the joys of its possession." Surreality occurs when we are active in both our external and internal realities at the same time. In a truly surreal work of art, the viewer will be engaged with the physical object as well as its imaginative potential. The strangeness of surrealist artworks was meant to awaken the imagination. Much surrealist sculpture, for instance, relies on the juxtaposition of unlike objects, such as a high-heeled shoe, a glass of milk, and a lump of sugar, among various other objects, in Dali's surrealist object functioning symbolically. Other surrealist work relied on biomorphic abstraction or amorphous shapes whose wobbly outlines could be suggestive of fruits, landscapes, objects, figures, really anything. These bizarre artworks send us into our imaginations as we try to make sense of them, bringing about at least a moment of surreality. It is worth noting, too, that the surrealists had a proclivity for non-traditional exhibitions and environments that foreshadow immersive spaces like Convergence Station and Shiki Dreams. The 1938 International Exhibition of Surrealism in Paris was full of random objects placed alongside or as works of art. Sacks of coal hung from the ceiling over a floor covered with dead leaves and moss, a pond with real vegetation, and two beds, among many other things. This exhibition sounds just as wonderfully bizarre as the environments constructed by Prismagic and Meow Wolf. Instead of surreality housed in one object, the surreality was manifested in the strangeness of an entire environment. You were literally brought into surreality. The quest for surreality, then, is a quest for immersion, engrossing the viewer in their own subconscious. Here we find the deeper surreality of Shiki Dreams and Convergence Station as they become immersive through an interplay between the physical space and the imaginary space. Every part of these exhibits, from the buildings themselves to the technologies used to animate them, are meant to manifest the imaginary world in physical space. This is most powerful in moments where perceptual tricks change our impressions of the space. A coordination of darkness, black walls, and smoke makes the dragon room in Shiki Dreams feel like an infinite void, and the use of mirrors on walls and ceilings in several of the rooms in Convergence Station similarly deny the building's physical actuality and make us perceive the space imaginatively. Meow Wolf even incorporates performance art in the role their employees play, like this one here, manifesting the imaginary world on a social level as well as physical and perceptual. These two experiences are, at their core, very different. Shiki Dreams, a gentle fairy tale, Convergence Station, a wild sci fi adventure. However, each is driven by a narrative, however loose. The scattering of clues across the exhibition spaces encourage the viewer to emotionally invest in the narrative. You care to find the details not necessarily to learn more about the artwork itself, but rather to learn more about the world the artwork represents. The sudden surprise of a dragon emerging from the dark or a galactic storm above a space-age cathedral brings us out of our physical presence in a constructed environment and imaginatively into Shiki's forest or the convergence of worlds. Walking through these environments, the viewer continually dances between the physical space and the imaginary narrative until the boundaries between the two are blurred and surreality is achieved. The cultural impact and language of surrealism, then, offers a theoretical basis for the transporting quality of these experiences, enabled by the technology and media of the 21st century.